In late 2006, Brentford were a club that were nearing rock bottom. Despite making the second division/League One playoffs in three of the last five seasons and reaching the fifth round of the FA Cup in back-to-back seasons, the aftershocks of the ITV Digital crash in 2002, combined with the failure to get promoted to the First Division/Championship, forced them to sell their best players to avoid entering administration, resulting in a historically bad 2006-07 season where they set new club records such as longest winless streak at 18 league matches, despite not losing any of the first seven to start the season, fewest home league wins in the season with 5, fewest league wins in the season overall with 8, most home goals conceded this season with 41, and finishing bottom of the division for the first time in their then 117-year history. While the on-the-pitch product was at its worst, off the pitch, something special was cooking. Something which would see them go from losing 7-0 away at Peterborough United in League 2 to beating the defending European and world champions Chelsea 4-1 at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League in just under 15 years. And it all started with a £500,000 donation from a man that initially wanted to stay anonymous, but would end up becoming the talk of the town for many, many years to come. But to truly understand how we got here, we have to go back. Back to June of 1998, when Ron Nodes, former chairman of non-league Southall, the original Wimbledon FC and Crystal Palace, bought the club and made himself the manager. He also brought in 19 new players for a combined fee of £1.46 million. 4 of them were on loan, 4 of them were bought on free transfers, which meant that 11 of those players cost that fee. This was big money for a club in the fourth tier of English football in 1998 to be spending, and this was a massive risk that Nodes was taking. However, this risk paid off, and in his first season on the club were declared champions of the third division, now League 2, after beating Cambridge United 1-0 away from home in a winner-take-the-title match with a goal from summer signing and eventual club legend Lloyd Owusu, returning to the third tier at the first attempt. The first season back at the third tier was uneventful. A combination of injuries, players from the title-winning core being sold, one of them being defender Herman Hreason to Wimbledon for a then club record fee of £2.5 million, and dud signings such as Julian Charles and Lorenzo Piemonte saw Brentford finish 17th in the second division, failed to win any of the last 12 matches to end the season, and only scored 5 goals in that time frame. The following season was more of the same, just without the player sales, as only 2 players left the club for a combined fee of £150,000. On the 18th of November 2000, Brentford lost 3-1 at home to semi-professional Kingstonian in the first round of the FA Cup. In response, Nodes sacked himself as manager the following Monday, but stayed on as chairman, ending his first and what ended up being his only stint as a manager, handing over to his assistant Ray Lewington for the rest of the season. 2 months later, Nodes further soured his relationship with the fans by selling utility defender Rob Quinn and top scorer Andy Scott to Oxford United. Despite the double sale, Brentford did improve, going from 17th in the table to 14th. They also reached the final of the Football League Trophy, where they ended up losing 2-1 to Port Vale in Cardiff. The next season saw Lewington not be given the manager's job full-time and left to go coach Watford's reserve team. He was replaced with Steve Coppell as manager, and in Coppell's first season in charge, he took the Bees from 14th in the second division to 3rd. And even then, in the final game of the season, they were at home against Reading. If Brentford won, they would be promoted alongside already crowned champions Brighton. They drew 1-1 and Reading were promoted instead, which meant that Brentford had to go through the playoffs. After beating 6th place Huddersfield 2-1 on aggregate, they came against Stoke City in the final, and they lost 2-0. Coppell's first season in charge of Brentford would end up being his only season in charge, as he quit a month later and his assistant Wally Downs was promoted. Why he quit, I cannot find anywhere why he quit, but you'll probably be able to figure it out as this goes on. Around this same time, almost every single Football League club was being hurt by the crash of ITV Digital and the closure of ITV Sport Channel. The Football League's then exclusive home for live matches, which lasted just one season and was a complete disaster, not just for the Football League but for ITV. With 14 of the 72 clubs being put into administration within 4 years of the channel's closure, Brentford almost joined that list of clubs in administration, with the home stadium, Griffin Park, almost being sold to property developers, with claims that the club would have had to join that list had the stadium not been sold off. In the end, the stadium wasn't sold off and the club didn't declare administration, mainly thanks in part to defender Darren Powell, who left to join Crystal Palace for a £400,000 fee towards the start of the season. With the club in around £4 million of debt, they couldn't spend any money on transfer fees and were heavily focused on reducing the wage bill across the season. A month into the season, the club's supporters trust Bees United turned down a £7 million bid from former QPR chairman Richard Thompson, a bid that Nodes himself described as, in his own words, a nonsense. Nodes himself resigned as chairman in March 2003 and was replaced with a man named Eddie Rogers, reeling on his way out that the club needed to reduce its wage bill once again next season. On the pitch, Brentford were barely keeping their heads above water, finishing 16th and 6 points clear of the last relegation spot, despite the fact they only won 5 of their last 23 games to end the season. The following season saw the club spend just £17,500 on transfer fees, and the lack of investment in the playing squad over the past 2 years this season really started to show on the pitch. Manager Wally Downs was sacked after a 2-0 home loss to Stockport County in March, which was not only their 5th consecutive league loss, but left them second bottom of the league with 10 matches left of the season. Knowing that relegation back to Division 3, which was about to be renamed to League 2, would have guaranteed the club going into administration and receiving a points deduction, the club knew they had to act fast. After a one-match caretaker stint from Gary Thompson, which he recorded a 1-1 away draw at Blackpool, he was replaced with Barnet manager Martin Allen, who drew 4, won 4, and lost 1 of his 9 games in charge to help them get up to 17th again. The next season was the full first season under Martin Allen, and despite another season of spending literally nothing on transfer fees, due to the club's debt having ballooned to almost double of what was reported a few years ago, of nearly £8 million, this ended up being one of their best seasons in decades. They reached the 5th round of the FA Cup, which is the furthest they'd been in 16 years, and finished 4th in the newly renamed League One, despite having a goal difference of -3. In the FA Cup, Brentford went to a replay in each round they were involved in apart from the 3rd round, where they beat Luton Town without needing a replay. Their first round replay match against Bristol City, and both legs of the playoff semi-final versus Sheffield Wednesday being shown live on Sky Sports, combined with their second round match against Hinkley Town being shown live on BBC, helped them generate not just TV revenue but matchday revenue to help them ease their financial problems. But it did not result in promotion, as they lost in the playoff semi-final to Sheffield Wednesday 3-1 in aggregate, who would go on to beat Hartlepool United in the final. Fatigue more than likely was the reason why they didn't get promoted, as the playoff semi-final at Sheffield Wednesday was their 58th and 59th match of the season. This is not including pre-season friendlies. The 2005-06 season saw them reach the 5th round of the FA Cup once again, this time only needing 1 replay in the second round against Oldham, and actually improved in League One to 3rd. However, drawing 6 of their final 10 matches, which included 2 wins and 2 losses, saw them miss out on a second automatic promotion spot to Colchester United by 3 points, despite scoring as many goals as Southend, who finished first with 72. It meant that Brentford had to go through the playoffs again, and they lost 3-1 on aggregate, again, this time to Swansea City, who scored the most goals in the division that season with 78. In January 2006, the club supporters trust Bees United officially got majority shareholding of the club, which made the club fan-owned, and they brought in former BBC Director General and lifelong Brentford fan Greg Dyke, yes that is his real name, to be the new chairman after Eddie Rogers was removed. In 2005, Benham made his first investment after reading in the February 26th edition of The Independent that Bees United were desperately looking for rich fans to buy into the club so they can buy out Nodes. Before getting into football, Benham had worked in banking and gambling, having jobs such as a hedge fund manager, vice president of the Bank of America, and was hired by gambler also turned football club owner Tony Bloom in 2001 at Premier Bet. Benham's money was made through a statistical model made by 2 university students by the name of Stuart Coles and Mark Dixon at Lancaster University, named the Dixon and Coles model. If you expect me to explain it here, I'm not going to, because it's genuinely really complicated. I've read it, but it's genuinely really complicated. But what you need to know is that it allowed them to make more accurate bets on football scores than traditional bookmakers, which allowed them to make more money. After leaving Premier Bet in 2004 due to a fraying relationship with Bloom, he founded Smart Odds with Stewart, a company that focused on statistical research sports modelling and then selling said information to pro gamblers. He was also part of a group called Triple Bet Limited, who went on to become owners of Matchbook.com, who would eventually actually sponsor Brentford for 2 seasons in the mid-2010s. Over the course of the next 7 years, Benham continued to invest in his boyhood club. He officially took over the club's debt in 2007, he helped them win the League 2 title in 2009, and also just overall got them out of their financial hole. By June 2012, Benham was able to increase his ownership in the club after approval from Leeds United. However much he owns the club now is currently unknown, but what we do know is that he is the majority owner of Brentford. Within 2 weeks of becoming majority owner, he bought a piece of land near Kew Bridge Station, stating to build a new stadium which was originally meant to be opened by the start of the 2016-17 season, but delays and logistical issues meant that the stadium didn't open until 2020. His first season as majority shareholder of Brentford was a infamously painful one. Despite having the best home record in the division, they went into the last match of the season absolutely needing to beat Doncaster Rovers to be promoted. In the last minute of the match, with the game tied at 0-0, they were awarded a penalty. Lone signing Marcelo Trotter took it, despite not being the designated penalty taker, and he missed. He hit the crossbar, which allowed Doncaster to score on the counter-attack to not only win the match, win promotion at Brentford's expense, but also win the League One title at Bournemouth's expense after they drew 0-0 with Tranmere Rovers. It meant that Brentford had to go through the playoffs again. And just like 2002, they lost in the final. This time to Yeovil Town, a club who had only made the Football League debut in 2003. This now means that Brentford have been in the playoffs 4 times in the last 11 seasons and have not been promoted once for it. Sounds painful, doesn't it? Well, I asked a Brentford fan who has requested me not to use his real name about what is the most painful moment he's had supporting this club, and you will hear his opinion now. The following season saw manager Uwe Rosler leave for Wigan Athletic in December, and Mark Warburton was announced as manager to at least the end of the season. Giving him the job ended up being a brilliant decision by Benham, as they were promoted at the end of the season, finishing second in League One with a still club record of 94 points, returning to the second tier for the first time since 1993, which helped Warburton secure the job full time. During that summer, Benham became a majority shareholder in another football club, Danish side FC Midtjylland, with a £6.2 million investment. From day one of his ownership, Benham stressed the need to make a more analytical approach to decision-making off the field, particularly in terms of who the club signs, and improved their approach to set pieces to score more and concede less. His new approach worked instantly, as in his first season owning them, the club won its first ever Danish Superliga title, and would end up reaching the group stage of the following season's Europa League after being eliminated from the Champions League in the third qualifying round by Cypriot champions Apoel. Down in the Europa League, they knocked out Southampton in the playoff round, finished second in their group ahead of European mainstays such as Club Brugge and Legia Warsaw, before being eliminated by Manchester United in the round of 32. Despite winning the first leg in Denmark 2-1, they would end up losing 5-1 at Old Trafford the following Thursday, in the match that's most known for Marcus Rashford's exploding onto the footballing scene. Benham would eventually sell his ownership stake in Midtjylland in August 2023, having won 3 Danish Superliga titles, 2 Danish Cups, reached the group stage of the Champions League in 2020, and never missing out on European football in his 8 full seasons owning the club. Seeing the instant success this new approach got him in Denmark, he started to bring it over back here to Brentford for the start of the 2015-16 season. The use of numbers and analytics to determine who the club signs and not spend beyond their means is what some people call it, drew comparisons to what Major League Baseball's then Oakland Athletics did in the first half of the 2000s, infamously nicknamed Moneyball, with Benham being compared to then Oakland A's general manager Billy Beane. However, Benham has come out in interviews saying that he hates when people compare the two, citing it as confusing. Later that same year, he would hire Dean Smith to be their manager. Smith would help establish Brentford back in the Championship over the next few years, with 9th, 10th and 9th place finishes before leaving for Aston Villa in late 2018. Assistant coach Thomas Frank was promoted in his place, and after only winning one of his first 10 games, they decided not to sack him and he's finished season 11th, 10 points out of the last playoff spot. The next season was Frank's full first season in charge, and it resulted in them jumping from 11th in the Championship to 3rd. After losing at home to Barnsley on the final day, a match had they won would have seen them promoted alongside Leeds United, which meant the playoffs again. This was also their final season at Griffin Park, a stadium which the club had called home since 1904. The final match in front of fans was a 5-0 win over Sheffield Wednesday on the 7th of March, and the 3-1 win over Swansea City in the playoff semi-final was officially the last match at Griffin Park, before they ended up losing in the final to West London rivals Fulham. In their first season at their new ground, what was then called the Brentford Community Stadium, they once again finished 3rd in the league. But this year was different. They reached the semi-finals of the League Cup, beating 4 Premier League teams on the way before being eliminated by Tottenham in the semi-final. And even then, they only lost because traditionally the League Cup semi-final is played over 2 legs, but because of COVID, it was only 1 leg, and Tottenham got to host that. If it was traditional 2 legs, who knows, maybe Brentford might have actually beaten them in the 2nd leg, but I guess we'll never know. Ivan Toney, who'd signed from Peterborough over the summer, and had never played in the Championship before this, broke the record for most goals scored by one player in the season since the Championship's 2004 rebranding, with 31 goals, a record he'd only hold for 1 season. And after beating Bournemouth 3-2 on aggregate in the playoff semi-final, they faced Swansea City in the playoff final, and this time they actually won 2-0, securing top-flight football for the first time since 1947, and also breaking their own playoff curse of 9 straight unsuccessful playoff campaigns dating back to the introduction of the playoffs in the 1986-87 season. Since becoming a Premier League club, Brentford have achieved things that sounded absolutely impossible 20 years ago, such as beating Manchester United 4-0 at home. Not just that, but they were 4-0 up after 36 minutes. Beating the defending Premier League champions Manchester City home and away in the season that would end up winning the treble, finishing just 1 win off England's Conference League spot, which ended up going to Aston Villa in just their 2nd season in this league, beating Chelsea at Stamford Bridge in 3 consecutive seasons, one of them including a 4-1 win. At the start of this season, it looked like the good times were coming towards an end and the club was heading towards a crisis. Why? Their manager Thomas Frank had left for Europa League winners Tottenham. Brian Mbeumo and Johan Wissa, who had scored 39 of the club's 66 league goals last season, had left for Manchester United and Newcastle United respectively. Their captain Christian Norgard left to join Arsenal, and the club replaced Frank with their set-piece coach Keith Andrews. A decision that was mocked on social media, with many fans and pundits having Brentford as a strong candidate to be relegated, including me. In my predictions, I had them finishing 19th. As I am recording this, and as you are listening to this, the Premier League season is over, and Brentford have finished the season in 9th. An optimistic fan would say that this has been a good season, as they were never in the relegation zone once all season, and only lost 3 games at home all season, and were as high as 5th in January after beating Sunderland 3-0. A more pessimistic fan might see this season as a failure, as they were solidly in the race for European football from January until the end of the season, but 1 win in their last 10 games, which started with 5 draws in a row, with one of them being a 2-2 home draw with Wolves, who had practically already been relegated. A 3-1 win over West Ham, sandwiched in between away losses at both Manchester clubs, 2-1 at United and 3-0 at City, before drawing the last 2 games of the season at home to Crystal Palace and away against Liverpool, which saw them miss out on the Conference League spot to Brighton on goal difference. Will they be able to push like that next season? Who knows? But the fact that the club was so high up when the expectations were so low just proves how good of a project Benham has created here at Brentford. It must be said though, while Benham has given Brentford fans their greatest memories, it's not all been smooth sailing. He has made mistakes. Of course he has. He's human. On the 10th of February 2015, Matt Smith of the Times reported that even if manager Mark Warburton gets the team promoted, he was still going to be sacked. He also reported that they had already almost lined up his replacement, Paco Yemes, who 2 seasons prior had taken Spanish team Real Vallecano to the highest ever league finish in the Spanish top flight of 8th, and were initially actually meant to represent Spain in the following season's Europa League alongside Valencia and Real Betis after Malaga were blocked for participating due to not following UEFA's financial fair play rules. But the RFEF, who are basically the Spanish FA, took Real's UEFA license away due to being involved in what they called a creditor contest, which to me just sounds like a nice way of saying financial issues, which meant that they couldn't play in it either, and the team that finished below them, Sevilla, took their spot. And to rub even more salt in the wound, Sevilla would end up winning the Europa League that season. And then they won it again the following season. And then again the following season. Where were we? Oh yeah, Mark Warburton. Exactly a week later, the club announced that Mark Warburton, the manager, and sporting director Frank McPartland would be leaving at the end of the season, regardless of where the club finished. The team were going to finish 5th in the championship this season, but were knocked out in the playoff semi-finals after losing 5-1 on aggregate to Middlesbrough. He was replaced not by Yemes, but by Dutchman Marinus Dijkhuizen, who had never managed outside the Netherlands and would last just 8 league games in charge before he was sacked, winning only 2 of them. And those 2 wins were against newly promoted Bristol City and Preston North End. Benham himself has openly admitted that hiring Dijkhuizen was a mistake, at a Matchbook Traders conference almost 3 weeks after his departure. Yemes, the man who initially wanted to hire, would end up actually getting Real Vallecano relegated that season, but that is what happens when you win just 1 league game away from home all season, and also lose 10-2 away against Real Madrid. And even then, they only missed out because they were 2 points away. In 2017, more was revealed about why Warburton left, with reports that Benham wanted a set-piece coach, but Warburton didn't, and that Warburton apparently had no say in who the club signed, which was a pretty valid reason, actually. Many months ago, Benham sold a stake in the club around £400 million. According to Sky News, that report could take over as much as a quarter of the club's value. With the club now fully established Premier League club, having finished 13th, 9th, 16th, 10th and 9th again in his 5 seasons back, could this be a sign of Benham having less control over the club? Brentford fans probably hope not. And I even spoke to one about his thoughts about it.
I think that the biggest concern for me is if he sells out fully. Like, if he sells out a partial stake, he hasn't been really investing in the club. He's just been reinvesting what we make off of transfer sales. That's how we've been sustaining what we've had so far for the past 5 years. So I think if he sells a partial stake, it could be bad, it could be good. I think the influx of cash wouldn't hurt, but for the long-term sustainability of the club, it's probably not great. Oh, I'd be very worried. I mean, you just don't know if it's some jackass American that's going to come in. Like, you just don't know. Yeah, and 777 partners with, oh God, a few clubs. I think they had Bordeaux. Yeah, one of them. And then there was one in Brazil that they did a pretty good job on killing too. Like, yeah, so you don't know, but you just hope that he's wise. I think it was Botafogo, yeah. It was one of the big clubs. Yeah.
Benham has the highest approval rating out of all owners according to a poll done by Paramatch in 2022, despite being the second poorest in terms of net worth. So, what's next for Brentford? Will they be able to one day show what they can do on the European stage? Or will this analytical bubble burst, sending them back down to the lower leagues where some fans think they belong? Nobody knows as of right now, but what we do know is that Matthew Benham's name has forever been etched into his club history. Not bad for a man that initially went by the term mystery investor.